Good afternoon. We are going to present our work on how we are preserving Himalayan glacier. So what I have done, this is a work, multiple organization. We have Bright Ice Initiative, Indian Institute of Technologies, Indore, Healthy Climate Initiative, Climformatics, and Indigenous Peoples Justice Forum in India. The way we organize this thing is that this presentation in three parts. What the problems are, and we have already discussed a lot about this problem, and that will be taken about 10 minutes by Mr. Rituraj Phukan, and then I'll discuss about the solution and what we are working on it, and then we'll go into climate modeling. That will be Dr. Subarna Bhattacharyya. With that, I'm giving it to Mr. Rituraj Phukan to talk about the problems that's happening in Eastern Himalayas.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I am from the Eastern Himalayas, the state of Assam. I am a Thai Ahom. The Thai indigenous people are one of the largest indigenous communities in the world, and our people inhabit different countries including Laos, Cambodia, South China, Myanmar, Thailand, and the northeast of India. Our state, Assam, is particularly one of the most climate impacted regions. We see devastating floods every year. But it is also one of the most rich in terms of biodiversity. In fact, the northeast of India is known for its biodiversity. Only last month, we had a new bird, new to science, discovered there. It's known as the Lisu wrenbabbler. And about 10 years back, another bird, the Bugun leochikla, was discovered, again new to science. These two are the only new to science birds in India in the last hundreds of years. We also have a very huge diversity of indigenous peoples. Over 100 communities inhabit the mountains and valleys of Northeast India. This year, the national highway connecting my hometown to Guwahati was home to thousands of marooned families for several weeks. Floodwaters entered my hometown for the first time ever, and we had wild elephants in my hometown, again for the first time ever. One of the consequences of climate change is, of course, vegetation change, and this has mostly been seen in my state, Assam, which among all the elephant range countries in the world has the most number of casualties, not just only in terms of elephants, but also human casualties. If you Google, you can see Assam is always in the news for all these reasons. It's floods or human-elephant conflicts. During this time, I'm going to just quickly look at the mental health issue. Men, women, and children were forced to live on the road for several weeks, and it happens every year. And they share that space, roadside space, with livestock, other companion animals, and they live in shacks that are totally unable to give them any kind of protection from thunderstorms or winds during the 3-4 weeks that they're forced to live on the roads. When I saw that, when I was driving, and I was totally dismayed by the helplessness, because we know the floods are predictable. They're happening every year. But despite that, despite decades of this happening, we are not able to give them a solution. People go back to where they live because they have to cultivate, they have to grow their food, and they do not have any other alternatives. And the floods have increased in intensity, in frequency over the years since I have grown up. The Hindu Himalaya assessment that has been referred to so many times has forecasted the total loss of glaciers in the Eastern Himalayas, almost 2/3 losses. By the turn of the century, even if warming was to be limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But the eastern Himalayas has already warmed by 1.3. That means we might as well lose all the glaciers over the next 20, 30 years. And the consequences would probably be more floods, which is quite predictable. But at the same time, a state like Assam, which is known for its water abundance, in the long term, is going to be part of those water scarce areas. And a few years ago, one of the data-driven analysis of where the water wars are likely to happen actually had the Brahmaputra Valley in the list, the 6 most likely places where we are going to see water wars. Now, several scientific assessments have found that communities that rely on the natural environment for sustenance and livelihood, as well as populations living in areas most susceptible to specific climate change events, faced increased risk of adverse mental health outcomes. Now, these findings are applicable for indigenous communities of the eastern Himalayas who are at a higher risk of hardship from impacts like flooding because of pre-existing socioeconomic vulnerability as well as a history of exploitation, conflicts, and social stigma. Despite insignificant contributions to the accumulation of greenhouse gases, our people are among the first to face the direct impacts of warming. And at the same time, we are very proudly connected to the natural world. Our lives depend on the biodiversity around us. With the loss of biodiversity, we are losing our access to health, food. During COVID time, many indigenous friends of mine were very reluctant to take the vaccine because they have never been vaccinated in their life, right? And we had to actually approach the medical board to see what would mean for somebody who has never been vaccinated to take this COVID vaccine. And after long-term consultations, they said it's safe to take. Now the question is, where do they get their immunity from? It is from what they eat, right? What they gather from the biodiversity around them. I believe that, personally, that ensuring indigenous people can access traditional foods in the face of warming impacts is climate justice. Despite being home to over 100 communities, indigenous communities, the Northeast never find representation in the global discussions. If we have loss and damage fund now, I was at COP, but who is going to ensure that these loss and damage funds, whenever they become available, will be delivered to the people at the front lines? Perhaps that is something that we can talk about in the sessions ahead. I'll end here, and I look forward to having more questions for the session. Thank you.
So let us go into the little bit of the melting problems and what are the causes and what we are doing to stop that. I don't want to belabor more on that it is melting. It is melting rapidly. What is happening, we talked about that quite a lot, that when it is melting, because it is the water tower of ACL, and many, many rivers are coming out of it, rapid melting is causing the flooding. It's no brainer on these things, right? It's just, if there is more water coming to that, there will be overflow and there will be flooding. At the same time, we understand that it is the water tower of ACL. If there is no water at some point, and which we can see, many predictions are telling us, then there will be water crisis. This is also no brainer, right? Now, what we are doing about it? In one hand, there are a lot of efforts, initiative, billions of trillions of dollars being spent to move from fossil fuel to these renewables, that decarbonization, which may take 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And most optimistically, 30 years, and most optimistically, that will remain in 1.5 degrees Celsius. But then again, it will be melting. And we cannot really even wait 30 years. So we have few of us good-hearted people that was looking into this. And we found the three really the causes, primary causes. One is that it's because of this carbonization, it's huge concentration of carbon dioxide, global warming is happening, and there is some effort. We cannot do anything about it. There will be 30 years, 40 years of carbon sequestration, carbon decarbonization. So that's something we cannot do, and we understand that the rising global temperature will happen, it will melt. But what immediate intervention we can do? So there are two other things happening. That as it is melting, the reflectivity of ice is going down, what we call as the albedo of the glaciers. Okay, so that is what is happening, one side. And because of the reflectivity is going down, more sunlight is getting absorbed and the temperature is getting higher. So it is accelerated the melting. Other things happening, and we talked about a lot, somewhat, that deposition of black carbon. That is also a huge problem, and if you go to the Himalayan glaciers, it's going to be black glaciers. And black body absorbs more sunlight, so it is also increasing temperature, and rapidly. So we have a project to lower the black carbon, and we are not going to talk about that part here. We are only focusing on how we can increase the albedo by some other means. And there has been a lot of work happening on this area. So what we found? We found that this work has been happening for the last 10 years, and the main to be for saving the Arctic. And the idea was that if we artificially increase the albedo, the reflectivity of the ice, somehow, with some reflecting materials, then we can reduce the melting. And we did that. We found a materials which is called hollow glass microsphere, which is basically tiny little sand bubbles, very light, 0.2 density. I mean, it's so light that it floats up in the water. So as soon as you put it there, it increases the reflectivity. And we have done that in Minnesota, in the backwater pond, and we found that. And you can see that the top area, where you can see that we did the treated area, with putting a small 1 hair width of hollow glass microspheres, and you see that the melting did not happen less, versus there is the other one where there is no. So we have a control area versus test area. And we published this paper in several peer-reviewed journals and in international venues, even in art circle meetings we have published this thing. And we have to shout out for the work that Dr. Johnson, Dr. Leslie Field have done for the last 10 years. So we have to try these things for the Himalayan glaciers. The glacier conditions are not the same situation as the pond ice, which is flat surface. So we are planning for a field trial in Chota Shigri Glacier in Himalayas this June. And the idea is here that we'll take up different conditions, different slopes, different melt condition, different altitude, a controlled area, 10 by 10 meters square, and then we have a test area. Put our HGM, that a coating of that reflective materials, and keep the other side no materials. And then we'll have all automatic weather stations to capture the melt conditions, the reflectivity conditions, and then see what happens. And it's a 3-year project for different conditions. This is what our plan is going forward to see. And I'll go more on that. The cost of this is very little. Most of our scientists and people working pro bono. Does not include all the research work that is happening at the back end, does not include the research that climate modeling that we need to do. It is only the field trial for 3 years. To fund the equipment and a research scholar from IIT and a field assistant, all the scientists will be going there pro bono and some travel cost. So it's a $250,000, and we need really support for this. Our team is really great team. We have formed organization from all over the world, and scientists working also from different parts of the world. And few of the names I want to shout out: Dr. Leslie Field, 60 issued patents, graduated from MIT and UC Berkeley. We have Dr. Muhammad Farooq Azam, who has made 35 research expeditions in Chota Shigri glaciers. And also Dr. Subarna Bhattacharyya, who did extraordinary climate results from their Arctic that she's going to present right after this. So with that note, I'm giving it to Dr. Subarna Bhattacharyya.
Thanks, Soumitra. Hi, I'm Subarna. We are Climformatics, a group of climate modeler and climate data scientist risk engineers from the US, California. We are based in San Francisco Bay Area. So I would like to present this, we are very proud of this result, that we can use custom climate modeling to understand the impact of any climate restoration technologies. And we have only one world, one Earth, so we cannot go and just test these technologies without doing full-scale climate modeling and impact assessment because it is too risky. So what we do is do a fully interactive climate modeling of the intervention. The result we show here is a work that we had done in collaboration and under Dr. Leslie Field of ICE 911 a few years back. The graph that we see on the left side is actually a business as usual Arctic sea ice, and you can see that that is much reduced. Whereas if we did apply what Soumitra said as the hollow glass microsphere, the silicon, reflexive sand, into the core of the Arctic sea ice, then in the year 2041, our simulation shows you can grow back the Arctic sea ice cover. And this was a very promising experimental result for us. And we presented this along with a host of many results in the paper by Field et al. In 2018. And since then, this work has been presented in many meetings, including the US House of Representatives and the World Economic Forum as well a few years back. So what is the promising fact from our work? Here is a picture on the left side of the difference in albedo perturbation with respect to control. And control here means, imagine everyone in the world is following all the Paris protocols, Kyoto protocols, and maintaining their emissions at a, curbing their emissions. And with all those moderately sincere efforts at abating emissions, whatever control we would get is our model control. And global minus control basically shows the difference in the albedo perturbation in the Arctic area due to the Arctic-wide application of the hollow glass microspheres. And you can see that this red and orange part shows the increase in albedo, which means that more and more sunlight is getting reflected back into the space than getting absorbed into the sea ice. And that is very promising because that causes a difference in the surface net radiation and on the surface as well as on the top of the atmosphere. And we have seen that by increasing the surface albedo with 4 to 15% of the Arctic sea ice, we can reduce the amount of absorbed surface radiation by 10 to 25 watts per meter square and send this radiation back to the space, and increase the outgoing radiation at the top of the atmosphere by 4 to 10 watts per meter square. Getting inspired by these results, we did a few more studies, which is the next slide. And now we thought, okay, covering the Arctic sea ice with this material is going to be very expensive. So how about let's find out what are the strategic regions where this can work. And we did a study on a small region between the Svalbard and the Greenland, and we got some promising results from there saying that this can start pushing the Arctic ice towards the core of the Arctic instead of having it flow through the Fram Strait into the Atlantic and melt. And so these are all very promising results, which says that if we can do this, it can be a great help in containing the polar vortex, which is often connected with the extreme kind of weathers that we see in the North America, in Europe. These very cold winds and climate systems, they can be contained in the Arctic if we do this intervention as opposed to not doing them. And so they're inherently promising. And we have seen correlations of these with the fire weather, wildfire conditions in the North America and Europe, and that these can help. So getting inspired by that, can we go to the next slide, please? Having being inspired with this experience, we want to bring this technology application and do a full-scale regional and global impact assessment with climate modeling for the Himalayas, because that is going to be very important for us to know. Although we have identified some test sites to start this work with, but it really needs very detailed climate modeling impact assessment to understand where we should do this intervention so that we get the maximum optimized impact. And so that's why we want to reach out to all of you to see how we can make this possible. And we have to understand this is a long-term goal. It can buy us time on, slow down the melting. And if we can slow down the melting, we can have less amount of water coming down the Himalayas, through the rivers, going into the sea. If we don't stop that, we're going to have an increased sea level rise. And the consequences, we have already talked about it so much across so many of the talks and discussions we've had. So climatologically, this can be sustainable. It's a small intervention. So far, these materials have been tested for environmental friendliness, ecologies, and toxicities, but more tests are being done. So we are already always testing on the, improved testing on different kinds of environment, but certainly this is promising. And with the climate modeling together with our predictive capabilities can actually tell us what to expect as a result of this intervention and where. And that can help us plan ahead, save lives, livelihoods, and all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Subarna. So, the conclusion, what I want to say, from the Arctic, the previous work, what suggests that putting a small coating of HGM or hollow glass microsphere, little glass bubbles, can slow the melting significantly. The modeling suggests that we don't have to cover the whole Arctic either. In certain strategic areas, if we do that, that can slow the melting, and over time, it can even grow ice. preserved back. So that is the key results that they have done in the past. What we want to do is that do the similar experiments in the Himalayas, and we chose a field trial to collect data and see how that works. But the conditions are not the same condition. We have to see if that works. And maybe we may need different reflective materials, and that is also under investigations. We are investigating in the back end that because of the slopey situation, that we may not, hollow glass microspheres may not be sticking together when it melts. So what kind of materials we can get? And there is some simulated studies going on back in Minnesota. So after 3 years, so our promise, we want to deliver 3 things. We want to deliver a solution that can slow the melting. We want to give you the areas, the strategic areas, where you need to put those reflective material that could preserve the Himalayan glaciers. And the third area is the cost, total cost, because we do not know how much cost it is going to be, and the time it is going to take to preserve the Himalayan glacier. This is our promise after the 3 years of study. We'll publish the results in open forum, various data. We'll work with the UN and or try to influence. Not I'd say that UN will work with us. It doesn't mean that the UN will work with us, but we'll try to influence UN and the Himalayan countries to adopt this solution. And finally, we want to say that we are running out of time. There is very little time we have, and we cannot wait. We need immediate intervention. The work we are doing is completely for public benefit. Thank you very much for your listening. And any questions?
Thank you very much. Yes, you need to suddenly look for a different material here because of the slope aspect. And you asked the questions which, trying to see where you need to test in Third Pole Himalaya region. See, if you look at the Indus, and the glaciers which feed into Indus is around 65%. So certainly, I think that needs to sustain longer because they are westerlies and their water source is coming from the glaciers. So if that increases very fast and loses, then there definitely that is required for high impact. That is one area. And the other thing which I see very clearly is, see, number of areas, if you go across, you will see glacier lakes are being formed. I will show you one of the slides tomorrow. So those glacier lakes are the indicators where the melting is taken. So those are the hotspots. Why don't you try and see in the hotspots if those glacier lakes are reconverted back into glaciers and there is a greater albedo effect, maybe we already arrest lot or avoid lots of disasters, one. The other thing is then you will have a long-term glacier. So I just thought these are the 2 potential areas for you to really look and then see. But wonderful, wonderful.
So thank you, Mr. Sharma. I think quickly I just want to respond to your question, and then I'll I see that Subarna also has a microphone ready. So this is definitely an area of our interest, and we definitely are thinking, because Geloff area, that glacier lake areas, are flat areas, this AGM has high potential of working that area. So definitely that is something we have a lot, and in our lookout, and we're going to study that. And the second thing I want to add that because if we can do that, it can solve a big problem going forward. So I want to end this. If you want to add anything, Subarna?
Sure. So thanks for the very good question and suggestion. I think that's exactly how we, as scientists and modelers, are thinking. But the interesting part about the Himalayan glaciers is that the different regions have different kinds of local meteorological and terrain-driven dynamics, particularly of the air. So in my reading, the central Himalayan glaciers are more affected than the western ones. And so internally in our team, we were having this discussion whether to try with the central Himalayan, which is melting faster. But due to some logistics things and prior experience of our team members working with those Chota Chigri glaciers in the west, we thought, okay, we'll settle there. But we are aware that the dynamics itself are different in the central, eastern versus the western part. And it's the central and the eastern which is affected more. Agreed.
Thank you, Subarna.
Thank you very much. This is the second time I've heard parts of this presentation because I heard Leslie speak at the Arctic Circle. My name is Meade Treadwell. I'm former chair of the U.S. Arctic Research Commission, and I'm very aware of the debate among scientists in the U.S. on whether or not geoengineering should proceed in any form. I guess the question that I have for you is two things. First off, Subarna, as a modeler, how much would you want to paint the world white, whether it was ice or white concrete roads instead of blacktop roads or white roofs instead of blacktop roofs, to really have an impact on albedo globally? And is this the most efficient way to get there? And I guess my second question is, frankly, we are fighting microplastics all over the world now. And for somebody to say, let's put a whole bunch of micro glass beads, which would show up in our fish, show up in our marine mammals, I'm wondering what your thought is about that.
I see Subarna already picked up the microphone. So let her speak first, ladies first, and then I will add to this.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your question. And you are right, we are all concerned, but whatever we have tested so far in terms of toxicology reports, environmental friendly reports, we've gone through several checks, we haven't seen anything adverse to that effect. However, from the climate impact side also, when we did this work, we saw that it is a small, benign kind of intervention because the size of the intervention is small. Of course, we showed the result as a hypothetical thing. What if we put the whole thing across the Arctic sea ice, what would be the impact? But then we were looking at strategic areas where a small amount of area can be treated and not the whole. So that way it is cost effective, it is least environmentally invasive, and still we can get the minimal optimal results that we are looking for. But having said that, if you compare this technology, but even before I get there, let me also make this comment. Our first result showed that this is benign, this can change the radiation balance, the budget of the energy, but it does not have, because of the nature of the signal, which is small, it does not have a big effect on cooling the global temperature by a huge amount. However, it is effective in containing the rise of the temperature. So if we are to maintain the SR 1.5 or 2 degrees, then this technology, if used wisely, can help us get there, but by not letting the temperature rise to keep it contained. But now if you compare this technology with other such restoration technologies, you would see that there are a lot of adverse effects in other technologies, which is not there in this one. But there is always this trade-off. It is far more safer than, say, for example, stratospheric aerosol injections. The other technology that is often compared to and studied along with is the marine cloud brightening. But all of these are local interventions, not global interventions, but although they are local, they do have a small, good kind of an impact, positive kind of an impact in the global. So that's what we are trying to balance in terms of modeling, to understand that what is like a slight small perturbation that you can give, which can still do the job of bringing it back to balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Subarna. Just to add a few what Subarna said. Yes, we are concerned. Geoengineering, I hear all those things like everyone does that. I don't want to go to the philosophical debate, do we have a choice? That's another question to ask. Whether we want to get that global instability because of the melting, because of the, I know that, I'm live in the US, I'm not facing it, but I know my fellow countrymen in Pakistan, where 33 million people got homeless, I understand their pain. I don't understand directly, I don't experience it, but I understand those people who are experiencing the pain, because they are my fellow countrymen. Here we are trying to do a research skill project. We have to be ready. We have to be ready because we can keep on doing research, and I know I have read enough about COVID, that enough of research finally to get to the point of getting, in telecommunication called 5 nines, with 99.999% accuracy. We'll never get there. By the time we get there, we'll probably lose the whole world. We won't get there. We have to be ready. It's a research scale project with 10 by 10 meters. And the potential delivery that we are proposing here is going to change the world. Whether that is going to be adopted or not, that's not in our hand. We're not saying that I'm going to go and the whole thing. We are going to deliver you how you can save and preserve the Himalayan glacier. We are doing the testing. We have not found that any effects, bad effects, ecologically safe. Sand, this is sand, abundant in the nature. Nobody has raised this question so far, that sand really, is it going to affect your, It is naturally, that is that natural sand we are using. And we are very careful about this issue. I understand that concern, and we take it very seriously. But this is a research scale project with a benefit of some time in the future, if needed, then can utilize that.
So can you finally adopt climate change? I listened to Rusty Field try to explain this to come to the Arctic Circle. But I listen to you now, but I still don't understand. Can you give me the 30-second explanation? Why it is, by spreading glass on a relatively small area, you can slow down the melting of the ice in a huge area? Just give me the layman's 30-second explanation why you only need a little space of glass to save a big part of life. I need to understand it, because this is the core of the whole thing.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for this question. I love it, and I would be very happy to, take it offline. But here. So the thing is, our climate dynamics is a complex one, and it's nonlinear, but if we can get to the right side of the dynamics by even a small intervention, then the rest is taken care of by the dynamics itself to get us the good effect. And that's exactly what we showed you in that small strategic application view graphs that we had, where we saw that a small application in a very strategic location, so for example, the Fram Strait is a very strategic location because all of the Arctic ice, whatever gets exported, gets melted, exports through the Fram Strait. And the interesting part is both the transpolar drift also is directed through the Fram Strait, and the Bhattacharyya, the nursery where the Arctic ice forms, that also finally gets exported through this Fram Strait. So that's the critical area. Now, if we can slow down the melting and the export there, it changes the local pressure, temperature, radiation, and the wind dynamics. And that's what is actually extremely exciting in this particular work that we have done, which tries to inhibit the export of the Arctic ice through the Fram Strait and tries to change the direction of the flow. And in doing so, it also actually lowers the Arctic amplification. And that's why this is so promising. I don't know if that's my quick explanation for that. Thank you.
So we have 2 minutes. So let us go with that and then come.
Yes, hello, my name is Thorstein. I'm from the Icelandic Met Office. 2 quick questions. First for you, Soumitra. You mentioned the slope issue, which is of course critical here. Himalayan glaciers are in a steep mountain range. So do you have any indication that the HGMs, once you have spread them over a sloping glacier surface and the melting starts and you will have meltwater flowing down the slope, that it will not sort of flush the hollow glass microspheres away? Do you have any indication of that? And then for Subarna, can you give us an indication of the logistics involved that would be involved in spreading HCMs over the entire Arctic region and the costs?
So thank you for the question. I'll get Tanmay right in the back or someone in the back, then I'll get answer. We have only 58 seconds, so we have to finish.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Hide Sakaguchi, the president of the Ocean Policy Research Institute, Sasuka Peace Foundation. I have a very small question. I understand the hollow glass is made up by silica, so it's very chemically stable and no harmless, no poison. But the material still you need a lot of material, right? But is it possible to use volcanic ash as a material to change the albedo? Because for example, Tonga issues, they are very in a trouble. How you use the volcanic ash huge amount, right? And as you know, the volcanic eruption makes global cooling all the time in the history of the Earth. So please consider about to use volcanic ash in addition to the hollow glass piece. Thank you.
So thank you for the question. To go back to your question and very quickly, is that we are concerned that hollow glass microspheres in the slopey situation, when the melting situation may not stick, that's a flat surface. We are very confident it will work. So in the geolough, the lake situation, that we have a very high confidence, and also in the flat surface. We are working in the back-end research to develop reflective materials, safe ecologically effective reflective materials for the slopey situation. But we'll try HGM as well. So with that,
I will just add to this question. There's also, the material, its size, its shape, and the material itself are still under research. We are continuously testing and improving. One of the design suggestions that I had for the materials is that instead of making them sphere, make them star-like, uneven surfaces, which is not easy to float away, and which is more reflective due to its fractal kind of nature. So it is still under research as to what we can do. Onto your question about carpeting the Arctic, we don't want to do that. And that's why we want to do it in small strategic areas, because otherwise it is a cost prohibitive, logistic-wise. It can be sprayed from, right now we were thinking that this material in the Arctic, in those straits, could be sprayed over from ships and tankers and things like that with blowers. But that's why we want to keep it to a smaller region and not widely across. Thank you.
And finally, to your question, we're running out of time. Let us talk offline. Yes, reflecting, it is possible. We do not know, but I'd like to learn more about your suggestion, and let us talk offline.
Can I get a few seconds?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So thank you for your question. My understanding that the volcanic eruptions bring in cooling because of the aerosols that they throw up in the atmosphere. I am not sure if organic ash is a reflective material in that sense. So the technologies would be different. Yeah, I mean, we need to test that so far. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And I hope we can all work together to solve the problem. I want to say one thing. I don't want to claim, or we don't want to claim that we have all the answer. We have a potential solution, and we have to work to find all the solutions that will work. Thank you very much.